Okay. So everybody just saw me do a lot of hand movements and didn't hear me, I guess, huh? On the webcast I'm talking about. So anyway, so yes, most of you in this room know who we are and what we do and our purpose, and that is to educate the public about the Maya, their great culture, and hopefully find people who feel the same way, as passionate as we do about them. So it's very nice to have you here. We're going to tell you a little bit about some of our trips. This is a trip that we took back in 2014 to the Yucatan, and in particular the area that is considered Puc, which is a very special area for me. I'm an architect. I really enjoy the detailing. I enjoy the architecture here. It's very developed, and there's a lot of very interesting ornamentation that is found on the buildings here. Most of these sites are much later in time period in the big scheme of the Maya. The Maya had an approximately 1,000-year run starting from 1,000 plus or minus BC through today. There's still several million in Yucatan, Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and maybe El Salvador as well too. And Belize, I always forget Belize. Yes, so it's still a vibrant culture. They've gone through many changes, and they accomplished a tremendous amount of feats of science and architecture. A lot of people don't know that one of their biggest feats is they had the concept of zero in their mathematics, whereas the Greeks and the Romans did not. Very good, very advanced in astronomy and other sciences. Architecture, and being an architect, that's kind of where I focus. Everyone in our group has their own sort of little area to focus on. Architecture is mine. So I'm going to tell you about one of our trips that we did to the Yucatan. This site is Caba. And it's a late classic site. Now, when I say that, all of these sites have a fair amount of different time periods that they span. So when you say it's a late classic site, it's, yes, the majority of it may be, but there's always going to be a little bit probably classic, maybe even earlier than that. But for those of you who are not aware of the time periods, it's pre-classic, which is 1,000 plus or minus BC through 250 AD. That's considered pre-classic. And then the classic period goes from about 250 to about 500 or 600 BC. Well, this is later. I'm not talking. Right. And then late classic, I'm just talking about the time periods in general. So, and then late classic is 7-ish. 700, 750 forward, and then there's a terminal and post-classic period that goes on until conquest, when the Spanish came and, well, took the area over. This thing is dangerous. This is a courtyard. This is one of the main courtyards there. The space is defined by several different buildings. The one in the back with the roof cone that you see is this is Puc style, but there is a variation of the style, and all styles have variations, but this is variation of one of those, and I'm not prepared tonight, and I can't remember off the top of my head. That's what happens when you get old. This is another shot from that area looking back to probably one of the most important buildings, maybe one of the more iconic Maya buildings, which is the Codspop, which is the building, well, it's that building in the center there. And it's a famous building, but more so famous for the opposite side of what you're seeing right now. It's like Jekyll and Hyde, this building. One side of the building is completely different from the other. The classic building style that we're going to see if we get around to the other side. Well, I'll talk about it in a little bit when we get there. I'll just cycle through these. We have some different styles here. We have colonnette style. You can see the colonnette sort of embedded into the facade there. And there's a whole component to understanding Maya architecture and how you read and understand the different parts and pieces. Everything, I wish I had a, do we have a print? Does it, no, but does it have the laser?
No, that one doesn't have a pointer.
I thought it did. Oh. If you have the other one, I could use that one. All right. So anyway, from this band that you see here that's above the doorways, that is called the medial molding, and that separates the lower wall zone from the upper wall zones. And then you'll see what's missing other than the far corner there is a cornice that would have capped the top of the building. Different styles have different things going on in these zones. You can see here, again, with this style, which is colonnette style, you can see we've got some round columns there, square capitals, a little bit of a mix in the styles with this building.
I am befuddled by this picture.
Why?
May I ask a couple of questions?
Oh, please. I could save some words.
No, the previous one, the one before.
Yeah.
It's those three doors right there,
Well, they're doorways, yes.
doorways.
Yes.
Is that one room?
Yes.
I don't remember this at all, because that would have caught my eye.
Well, that also happens to us when we get older, too.
What did I do to deserve this?
No,
Anyway.
that's one of the big buildings that forms that square.
But I know, but the square also is a surprise. But anyway, that's the back of the Cots Pop.
No,
Where am I then?
exactly.
Well, give me a map.
Is it working?
Out of, so why not?
Yeah, that's good, that's good, thank you. And what is it, the top button there?
The top one, yes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so let me just cycle around through some photos and you can get oriented, okay? So the building that you're unfamiliar with is this building that is now out of the picture here. But when you walk in up that raised area, that's the courtyard that you come into. This is the building that is at the end of that vista. When you're on the road and you're looking up, this is the building that you see. The Cods Pop is off to the side.
Can I just make an architectural observation or
Sure.
something? 'Cause
You might get laughed at, but go ahead.
one somewhere to this.
Sure,
this,
yeah.
Maya buildings always have uneven doorways. By that I mean it's either 3, 5, 7, 9. That last building we looked at had 7. When you're in the Bush Mall.
Yeah.
Was that section called the Nunnery or whatever it is? There's 4 buildings around.
Mm-hmm.
5, 7,
Mm-hmm.
9, 3, whatever.
It's a good observation. I think you're right. This is backing out now a little bit, Marta, as you're getting more toward the Cods Pop is off in this direction. It's off this way. Okay, now we're looking at the building that you were unfamiliar with.
Marta, this is why we have to go back there, because we didn't see this.
Yeah.
We walked right by it and didn't notice it, I don't know. And I think that's the leading towards to the lodge.
Yeah. Now, this is the backside of the Cods Pop. This is the opposite. This is one of the corners, looking at the corners, but the opposite side. There's the roof comb up here. And then the mosaic side is,
Because, you know, if the whole thing falls there, the end of the platform is right there, so.
yeah, you can start to see the vaults now starting to appear that have been broken off. Obviously, this part of the building would have extended and it's now in disrepair. But there's some very interesting lattice details, and you've got some colonnettes and things for columns, colonnette style. This is from that higher corner looking back down onto the plaza that we were in and discussing the other buildings. That's a side view of that one building, and what's interesting is this walkway that goes underneath the stair like that. This is the side of that building. I'm not even go where it is. I know where it is, but it's the side of that building that you were unfamiliar with. But I saw the reason why I went back here actually is because I saw a motmot, and a motmot is an extremely colorful bird. And he flew down there and went into one of those rooms, so I went down there to see if I can find him. But I did, but he took off, but I didn't get a picture of him. I don't know if he said motmot, but you know, I got to tell you, it was a beautiful bird. Okay, but again, very interesting is the openings with the capitals. You'll notice that it's very low, you know, I mean, it's... Oops, that one's sideways, but it's unfortunate, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. This is actually, should be rotated 90 degrees clockwise. And this is actually a lintel over the opening. And this is a carved jamb that would be on the side of one of those doorways. There's not a lot of these on this site that you find, but these are pretty nice and they're in pretty decent shape. And there's a companion one to the opposite side of the opening.
To the left is the lintel, right?
Yeah, these are the lintel. This is the lintel. Actually, it's 3 pieces.
It's not original wood.
I doubt it's original. But you never know. But when Jack comes, sooner or later, he'll talk more about these lintels. So I'm not going to give any of that away. That's the other side of the opening. It's great detail, though. It's beautiful. It's in great shape.
They got a lot of kids on there.
Yeah.
What is it?
You know, I don't know, but if you look carefully at it, and it's hard to because it's sideways, you know, but you can see a lot of headdresses and stuff. And I believe this room that this opening creates is a throne room at the back side of the God spot.
You see this guy right here? You see the headdress?
Right here.
That one, no, this one, well, that's one too.
Well, they all have headdresses, yeah.
Well, but I'm trying to point so that people get it.
Which one? Here.
Either one, either one. And then they both have,
It's the top button.
because the top,
The top button.
see, that they have a lance.
Right. There's weaponry.
So you can almost assume that they are warriors.
Warriors.
Of some sort.
Yes.
This guy, and it's always, this guy is less than this guy. This guy is more important. And one of the things that tell it to you, oh, thank you, is that this guy probably is the ruler of this place. And one of the ways of telling that is because he is dancing. And the dancing in the Maya world is always done like this. They have one leg raised, all right? And that dancing probably is a ritual dance of we won, okay? So yes, indeed, you have a warrior here and then the ruler over here. I am not too sure about this, but this down here could be a captive. And so they're telling this story, it's one story in 2 chapters. And this chapter probably, look at it, they're giving him the last rites right here. And you can see the leg, he's bent, he's sitting down. Can you see the leg?
He's like in a crouched position with his knees up to his chest. Yeah.
So now, and here is the warrior again, and this guy may be a kind of priest to give him, like I said, the last straw. The captors, if he is there, he is also of a noble family. He would not be a regular farmer. He would be somebody of stature in a community, probably from another community. But they usually kept them captives, slaves captives. They're not slaves. And very often when they write, they telling the story. I'm assuming that perhaps that.
I don't think there is on the
Maybe
perimeter,
not, but
no.
it seems pretty destroyed, so
Yeah.
But anyway, dates and the place of this, because it is the Pook area, I doubt very much that they have names in this, because the Pook was not really classic.
So I
Thank
guess
you,
we've,
sir.
you're welcome. I guess we figured out Marta's area of interest. Yeah, there's a detail of it a little closer, and maybe you can see some of what Marta was saying a little closer, a little better.
No, it's the same.
Yeah.
But you can see the way, anyway.
This is the opposite side. Anyway, these are unusual to find on sites. You don't, I mean, it depends on the site. Some sites have a lot of them, but most sites don't have this kind of work visible in great amounts. So when you come across it, it's always fun to find. Jeez. So we should have brought some wine with us, then it would be fun. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Anyway, this is that room that I believe is a throne room here, and there would have been a bench seated in this area, and here you can kind of see the remnants of it right here. So this obviously was a special space. Again, you can start to see the corbelled vault, or at least what's left of it. And again, Jack will go into detail tonight about some of those elements, so I won't talk a lot about it right now. From that platform, looking back at the courtyard and those buildings there, the Mott was down this little side right down there. I wish I had a picture of it. No, we'll have a conversation about that later.
On this recent trip to Guatemala, we spent hours discussing about the one that makes these, so we won't go into that.
Another nice detail, again, that you don't see is still these 3D human figures in statuary. Now, those would have been tenon into the wall, meaning there would have been like little stone pegs and a hollowed area on the back of the statue that would have sort of plugged into that peg, so to speak. Lattice typically has a connotation of royalty or a mat. You sort of see those show up in these areas. And again, this is probably an important room here. Beautiful work. This is a little bit peculiar to this site. I've not seen that detail. I mean, if I saw it somewhere else, it would be only one other site. I've not seen it in other places. Maybe Uxmal, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, it's a unique detail to this area. And again, this is your lower wall zone. This is your medial molding. And this would have been your upper wall zone. And this in particular is obviously got ornamentation on it. It just shows a break through the wall there going into what would be another room. All that rubble. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. And then again, for those that are not understanding 100% what you see is that these vaults are corbelled, so they kind of like stepped up to create the vault. They're not a true arch. But all of that rock was infilled. That was all constructed out of rubble. The Maya were basically a Stone Age technology, or their technology was basically Stone Age. They didn't use metal and they didn't use beasts of burden. So for them to accomplish the feat that they did, and when you see these huge pyramids and everything, it was basically all built by hand. And they kept the rocks typically small that they could be easily transported. unlike, sure, certainly.
Why is it not organized? Why is it?
Because it would have been concealed. You wouldn't see it as in you're talking about the rubble of it? Yeah, because it is, it would have been concealed behind a veneer. The wall up here would have looked like this. So that's just what was the rubble core. And they did have a concrete that they used, yeah. Well, there we go. I usually turn those around. I don't know why they're like that. No, well, this is from 2014. I don't think so. So here we're starting to see the other side of this building that's got this dichotomy or Dr. and Jekyll aspect to it, where you've got this very regal and royal side, and then you've got this other side that's very geometric, very artistic. These are chalk masks, and you can see the eyes.
Chalk is,
Okay, Chalk is the god of rain. So he was a very important deity because their whole culture was based on corn, and it all boils down to food, and you need rain, obviously, to grow. So those things were very, very important. So Chalk was always one of the main deities that were prayed to or turned into a stone version. But this building kind of takes it to the extreme. You won't see another building that's really like this. And they're actually still putting it together. In fact, the last time we were there, they really made some progress on that broken end. Yeah. But you could tell by the color of the stone, it's very clean. They are in the middle of consolidating this. At least they were back in 2014. You mean as far as why one side is different than the other? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of speculation. I mean, we have a sister club in Minnesota who one of their members has got a very intricate theory about what's going on with the roof comb at the top, that it also interacts with certain times of the year and the way that the light hits it and what it does. And but I don't know that there's a reason. I'm not sure what the reason would be why it would have been different like that. Just that there's a big plaza on this side here. So I would look at this as being, I would think that the reason for the difference is that this side, well, this is the end, but this side would be more public, whereas the back side, being access to the king, is more semi-private. And, I think the building was split that way for those reasons, but why they chose to decorate them the way that they did, I don't know. This is called a mosaic style for the obvious reasons, where it was always lots of pieces put together to form the masks. Those are all individual pieces that you see there. And again, that's a side of the building stepping back a bit, a little closer in. And you can see some great detail and stuff in here. These base moldings and stairs actually look like dentals. There's a good look at all the pieces that go into making that, but obviously you have the eyes, ear spools. This would be, there's some debate whether that's his nose or his tongue, because he's supposed to be spitting out rain of sorts. Am I going backwards? No. Yeah? Okay, so there we go. So this is the front of the building. And all these pieces that are in front are not intended to be that way, other than that's the way that they've organized them, looking for the spot that they go back into the building. But this whole area,
This is not 2014.
yeah, it is,
That one, that picture?
yes. This is new.
Exactly.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Here's Jack.
Here's Jack Stein, hurry up.
I usually tell everybody to turn their phones off.
And you keep yours on.
Hello?
Okay, I'm here, by the elevators, how, well,
Downstairs,
okay, before the elevators, past the elevators,
right across from the elevator.
right across from the elevators, back.
Marta's going to come out and hold your hand to show you how to get in here. All right. Sorry, folks. Kind of a weird meeting tonight. Anyway, traffic was really bad for everybody. I come from Broward. Jack comes from Broward too, so the traffic was pretty bad today. So, I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, so this is that side of the building, and very iconic for a mosaic style Maya architecture. And again, this is the area of the Pook. Pook is Maya for hill. I'll just cycle through some photos here before Jack comes in, and there's a lot of repetition because these slides weren't culled. This is a raw folder that I have.
These buildings were reserved for upper class?
Yeah, these buildings, like, people didn't live in these buildings. Like, when you see this whole complex that you've seen with all these different buildings, it's what would be called like the city center, okay? Ceremonial center. They weren't used for living. They were used for the daily business of the Maya, for their accounting purposes, throne rooms, palaces. But palaces weren't necessarily what you think of a palace being. It could be an area where they had scribes that were, doing scribe work or chiseling some of the glyphs and things like that. So, and other, business of accounting of how much corn and, that kind of stuff. So, the people, you got to think of the organization of their culture as you have the ceremonial center, which was like City Hall, okay? Then on a perimeter, the next perimeter ring would have been like the elite. The elite would have lived on the immediate perimeter of the city center. Then you would have artisans being in that next ring, just the next ring of living outside of the elite living. And then on the absolute outside perimeter, you would have had farming. So. I'm sorry? Yes, you can take that off. Yeah, you just have to eject it, I guess, yeah. Oh, you're very welcome.
Keep us entertained while the speaker arrives.
Get my phone there too before I forget that. Jack. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna just.
Well, it's time for averaging.
Jack.
I think between the times that we were doing 5 and the times we were stopped, it was like 2.5.
See, he doesn't need any magnification. Put them on.
I
on
don't
your belt.
need that shit.
No.
Oh, you want to record it, you want to record it.
Here, put it on.
It says, my,
All right, come on, let me get you set up so I can sit down here.
Well, you should have asked me, because that's been closed for one lane for a long time.
There we go. I'll stick it over here.
Rudy, all the time. Every time we come, except the very first.
So you're all the way east, and you you go all the way at west to do that.
Much faster, okay? But for those 2 miles, it took us half an hour. We timed it, 2 miles, half an hour.
Well, nevertheless, half an hour is,
Okay. Yeah, let me make sure I don't lose this. Although this is just a copy. This is just a copy. Well, I have a
And
laser
we
here.
also have a.
Okay, let me see, because it helps me having less things in my hands.
He's gonna fall over here.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Get your cameras ready. We have, and we also have a young structural engineer in the back of the room.
No kidding, really?
Sorry.
yeah, we should have missed it, but, yeah, it's
I'm gonna sit out of the sun.
Stick with it, it's an exacting life.
forward. Oh my God, don't get it.
I'll talk to you later if you want. Okay, okay. So this one doesn't work?
This one doesn't work.
Okay, so
That one is quick.
forward, back.
And on top, the laser.
Top is the laser
Yes.
that I can't see.
It is there.
I couldn't see it was shed.
No, he's colorblind.
Oh, okay.
I can see mine a little better. Anyway, we'll see. Okay. For those here, I don't need introduction. You all know who I am.
Rafael.
Rafael doesn't know who I am. Okay. I am a structural engineer, and I have been working in the Maya world with archaeologists since '92. You do the math. Whatever. Long time. I am also, because of that, Director of Research of the Institute of Maya Studies.
That's it?
Yeah, most important thing I want you to learn today is strong, hard, and tough are not synonymous. They are 3 different words because they describe totally different properties of materials. That's especially true for you. At one point, not understanding that cost the life of many people, because that's exactly why the Titanic sank. Newfangled ship, Marta keeps saying no, but that's okay. If I say square, she says round. If I say up, she says down. We've been doing this since '92. Okay, the newfangled ship, instead of using the old steel malleable rivets, they use high-strength bolts. Fewer of them because they were high strength. They didn't realize that the new high-strength steel was also a lot more brittle, particularly at cold temperatures. When the ship hit the ice, the impact fractured whole seams, and whole seams opened up. Which, the plate or the bolts? Well, it was the bolts that failed, so. In any case, like I said, hard, strong, and tough are different properties. Hardness is a surface property, only on the surface. As everybody knows, diamond is the hardest material in the natural world. By the way, until very recently, the hardest material period. We now actually have some man-made materials that are a little harder than diamond, but very few. Still, most real hard tools, as you know, for cutting glass even and what have you, that they don't have to be, other things work just as well, are done with diamond. Diamond cores, diamond drills, et cetera, okay? Most construction around the world of ancient civilizations were made of limestone. Limestone is basically calcite. You can see there's only 3. So there's a hell of a slew of things that work well for cutting limestone, which is one of the things that makes limestone so popular for construction. It's pretty halfway strong, pretty tough, and again, let's go back to that. Hardness is just a surface property. Strength means how much unit stress, how much load a material can take, okay? Toughness is how much energy it can take. Think impact, okay? Steel is softer, as you can see, particularly I see on the right side, knife or steel file even, that is a little harder, is softer than diamond. It's even softer than glass, which is basically molten quartz. That's why you can use a clean razor blade to take the paint off your car windshield, because steel will not scratch glass if it's clean. Because if it's rusted, iron oxide is harder, and you can sure scratch the hell out of your glass. So if you're ever going to use a razor blade to take anything off your glass, make sure you clean it well, okay? However, you take a diamond, and you sure can smash the hell out of it with a hammer of steel, because it's not as tough and it's not as hard, okay? On an impact, steel is tougher. Diamond is harder. In fact, glass is harder than most steels, but not as tough or not as strong. Although in single fiber, glass is pretty strong. That's why we use fiberglass in fiber-reinforced polymers, okay? So calcite is what limestone is, and even the toughest limestone is still basically calcite. So you can carve it very readily with a lot of other stone implements, as you can see, made out of anything higher than number 3. Okay? This is chert. Chert is okay, let's go back. See what quartz is, number 7? Well, chert is basically a microcrystalline quartz, cryptocrystalline they call it sometimes because it's so small that you can't see the grains. But it is basically quartz. And chert is just a name that we use when this cryptocrystalline quartz is white or whitish. Is actually the mineral is called chalcedony. And agate, flint, it's about 5 or 6 others based on their color. Don't remember them all right now. But they're all basically the same cryptocrystalline quartz. Okay? And agate is extremely common. It deposits as nodules inside limestone. Extremely common in limestone area to find chert nodules. And of course, it's very strong. I mean, it's very hard, number 7, but it's not very tough. That's why all of this flint, chert, and all of these things chip when you put them under pressure so easily. That's why they've been used for millions of years by ancient mankind to make tools. Chip tools work well because the material is hard but not tough. You apply pressure with an antler tip and it flakes right off, okay? On the other hand, you can scratch the antler, obviously, with a chert. So again, tough, hard, different properties. This is an adze head. An adze is a working tool that's basically just like an axe, but instead of an axe being this way with the blade this way, an axe is with the blade this way. Basically like a hoe. And you can use it to shape wood. Olden times when they cut logs, or they square off the log with axes. Also stone. You carve stone, and then you shape the stone into shape, limestone particularly, with axes. These are chisel heads, okay? My acquaintance, Jim Ocon, which some of us know, who is a structural engineer, by the way, specializes on bridges from Atlanta. Jim Ocon thinks that most of the axe heads that we have in museums and a lot of these ceremonial things that we call jade are not really jade, but are jade, but are black jade. And they're actually chisels, large chisels. And this is the size of chisels, particularly that first one you have right in the middle.
Take a look at this.
Yeah, of course. Okay, I'm going to depend a little on you. What color is it?
Very dark green.
So it is green. It's extremely possible that this is a jade chisel head. Yes. In fact, even more than that, and we're going to look at all, they didn't give you the tables you wanted.
They gave us a table, they didn't bring the stuff.
Oh, okay.
Well, he brought the stuff, but it has to be carried.
Whatever. If you notice, there are flakes that have come out of this one.
Yes.
So it does look like this was a chisel that has been hammered. Now, I'll show you something else later also. Okay. But this, I would bet anything, is well, it is a chisel, but I would bet anything that it is a chisel, actually, for more direct impact. Axes would have been hafted and used like that. This shows signs of impact on the rear. So this looks like a broad chisel, like exactly the things I'm showing there. By the way, because true jade and flints in hardness are not very far away from each other, they're hard to separate except with an X-ray diffraction, because they have totally different crystallography inside. But that has to be done with X-ray. If you can scratch it, if you can get something just a little stronger, like topaz or something, or quartz itself, that's 7. Jade is like 6.5 in one direction and 6.7 in the other one. So, like with a quartz tip, if you try to scratch it, you scratch a little easier in one direction than in the other. Sometimes you can use that to differentiate them. Anyway, there we go. These are different JDI chisels. Definitely. All of this, you can see the tips. Those are gouges. Those, I would bet that those chisels we use mostly like to square off stones in construction. And those thin chisels were mostly used for inscribing glyphs and other things in stone for decoration. I have a real teeny-weeny, and I couldn't find it. I moved twice in the last year, so all my stuff is in storage, and Rose knows where in storage. I have a real small church chisel. Looks very much like the top one there in the middle, but white, from Palenque. And I think because it's very small, but broad head, that it's the kind that was used to chisel plaster. Because it wouldn't take plaster's real soft, particularly before it hardens, Once it hardens completely, it's limestone. And that shows you exactly Maya carving a stela with a chisel. And notice the hammer he's using is wood, so as not to shatter the top of it. Because now, jadeite is tougher, so it makes a better chisel than flint or chert. Although flint or chert are harder, but they're not as tough. Remember from the beginning we went over that. So it would shatter the head, and that one is a little shattered. Okay, this is just natural limestone outcropping. And this is one of the reasons that limestone around although is very common around the world. But one of the reasons that limestone is used so much in construction is, in ancient times, is because this is a natural deposit. So,
To your left, there.
yeah, but I was trying to see it. Yeah, I can barely see it. It's very easy to carve a groove there to the bedding plane, and you square it off a stone. Lost it again. And you square off a stone, and then you cut there down again, and you cut another stone, okay? And then you can take out, you carve down a groove, and you carve down a groove, and you take the stone in the middle, you carve all the way to the bedding plane, you don't have to cut across, comes right out, and now you can use your broad chisel to shape it into place.
Egypt also has limestone.
Oh yeah, of course.
I meant just,
Yeah, I know, yes. Everywhere in the world there's limestone.
but I'm talking about the ancient
Yes, yes, yes.
buildings, but the
One
Romans
of-
didn't bring.
The pyramids are a type of stone called nummulitic limestone. Nummulite, the word comes from numismatic, from coins. Nummulites are little fossils that look just like a dime, the fossils. So it's that kind of limestone, which of course most limestone is highly fossiliferous because it's all made from dead animals. That stone has a lot of these fossils in there. I remember looking for them and finding them. In fact, I have a couple of samples of it. Yeah, well, yes, there. So yes, yes. Now, of course, they also use granite, but granite's a lot harder to work, silicious. And that came all the way from the south. We'll talk about transport later. But anyway, that's the way, yeah, the Romans used, in many places, remember, Roman Empire goes from Scotland to Syria. The Romans used also limestone whenever they could, but right around the area of Rome itself, there is a lot of volcanic tuff, which is formed by, it's just like limestone, but it's a deposit of volcanic ash that consolidates and lithifies over millions of years. So like the Colosseum core is all of volcanic tuff, right there from the area of Rome itself. And then they dressed it a lot with travertine. Travertine is also limestone, but is a very evenly laid limestone. It's not marble, but it looks like marble a little bit. I like it even better. And it came from the Sabine Hills, just there to the northeast of Rome, right where Tivoli is. They have some great mines of...
They used a lot of brick, too.
Well, yeah, afterwards, yeah, they started manufacturing their own material. And the Roman Empire is all built out of brick, from the Pantheon on. Yeah, it's a secondary thing, but the Colosseum structurally is mostly, yeah, and also concrete and what have you. But let's take to a stone. So that's how stone was. That is an actual Maya quarry. This is in right behind, has to be about maybe quarter mile at the furthest from Washington. And you can see there the way they were grooved. They just take the limestone top exposure and you groove it like that with axes down to the bedding plane, and then just fracture it and take it out, and then finish squaring it off. And as you can see, it's pretty much squared off already.
The Egyptians did that with obelisks with pounders.
Yeah, they did that with obelisk in granite. That's a totally different story. Yeah, a lot harder. But the method is the same. Material and tools are different.
Do you know anything about ancient India?
Very little.
Oh,
Very little.
because his family comes from India, so.
Well, do you know anything about construction in ancient India? Unfortunately. I am giving at Rudy's place at the Broward County Ecological Society, and Rick and I started it since about a year ago. We've been teaching courses in ancient building construction, different civilizations. And at the next one of the things I'm going to say is there are certain civilizations I'm going to skip just because I don't know that much, and India is one of them. I know one thing about India, southern India, the, whatever the culture is called, I forget. It'll come to me in a second, were the first people to use iron structurally. There's still this huge beams, no shape, still just like if it was a wood beam. This huge beam of wrought iron, just heating and slamming little pieces together. They were the first structural use of iron. Okay, this one,
Didn't come out good.
much better, much bigger quarry, as you can see.
I don't see anything there.
You're kidding me.
No, it's little squares.
What? Yeah, no, those are not pixels, those are the rocks. It is maybe a little pixelated, but that is the shape of the rocks. This is a very large quarry behind, about 1 or 2 miles behind Uxmal in the Pook Hills.
That looks like a building to me, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, but they took them out. The building is where they took all those pieces that they took out. That is, as you can see, a very large quarry. Those are blocks left about that big. Okay, so you cut your rock. And now you got to start building your building. And the first thing you got to do is lay out your building. So you use plumb bobs, and I believe a lot of pendants that we find, my belief is that many of those are not jewelry. Obviously some of them are. But I've seen a lot of pendants that I would bet are not jewelry, but plumb bobs.
This size?
Yeah.
Really?
I can show you nowadays bronze pendants that big. Particularly when there's a lot of wind, you want a heavy plumb bob so the wind don't move it around. But we had once a pendant just about this size in our silent auctions, remember, that I tried to buy. Somebody else bought it from under me.
Were they worn on a finger?
Huh? And it wasn't decorated at all. And I bet anything that that was really a plumb bob. Anyway, so you use a plumb bob and a string just to establish a vertical. And of course, the way you establish a horizontal is you use any ceramic bowl, fill it up with water to the rim, adjust it so that the rim is even everywhere with your water, and you just look over the top of the water. And that's a perfect level. And of course, for linear measurements, that is what the Maya measurements were. And in Maya still used. A sapal is the distance between the tip of your fingers, okay?
Of a Maya man.
Equivalent in concept to the English fathom, the Spanish braza, which technically means arm length. And if you remember, that's what the famous diagram of Leonardo da Vinci shows, is the distance between the tips of the hands of a man is basically the same as his height. Basically, some of us have slightly longer arms. So a shorter man, Maya man, a sapal is about equivalent to 5 feet. And a short, remember the X is sh, and it's double O, since this was Spanish trying to write down Maya sounds, is not U, is just O-O. So S-X-O-O-T is short, not shoot. A short is a finger width, and basically 1 centimeter. And a cob is 1 hand width, close fist. And that way you have 9, because you have the space between your knuckles are the same thing. One sob, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 shorts make a cob, and 16 cobs make a sapal. And the way you would do that, of course, is I would simply take a string and that's 1 sapal, and you make 1 knot there, and that's 2 sapals, and you make your second knot there, and so on and so forth. And this should be about equal, we hope. Yeah, about. And if it's not exact, that's okay, because if you just copy the same one over and over and over, any inaccuracy you have in one, you multiply. But by doing everyone independent, statistically, your errors should equal out. Anyway, that basically becomes your measuring string. And indeed, when they started laying out a building, there was a ceremony, just like we have the laying of the cornerstone or that kind of thing. They had a ceremony that was called the stretching of the cord. And that's very typical, because even with tapes, not nowadays that we use laser measurements a lot, but until very recently, the first thing you did with your tape is you had to put it under tension to get it to read right. In fact, for very accurate, I remember in school, for very accurate measurements, not that it made difference for anything except the professor, you had to put the metal tape under standard tension. We had a little tension device that you had to put so many pounds of tension to get an accurate reading of your metal tape, and then correct for the temperature. And I took surveying on a very, very hot Gainesville summer, and believe it, we had to correct for the elongation of the steel. So with your vertical set and your horizontal plane set, now you could take visually your positions, and you can take your measurements just with a string. Any questions?
Do you think they made plans?
Of sorts. I'm sure they made plans of sorts. Probably somewhere like for example, and I'm sure they probably did too, there's a spot, you do, I don't know if everybody else knows Rome well, right close to where the tomb is of Augustus Mausoleum. They were repairing pavement, and they took out the more modern pavement, and in the floor of the limestone below, they found inscribed, full scale, the whole layout of all of the front of the Pantheon, or the original Pantheon. Remember, the one there now is Pantheon 2. Yeah, they inscribed it into the stone. Apparently, they unloaded the stones there and tried them all in the ground and put them all to make sure they fitted right before moving them over and putting them on the building. So, and there's a place in Peru where they have found a big stone, and also they have inscribed the building that were going to be there. So I'm sure they use.
The Maya had graffiti. They did.
Yeah, they could have done it. They could have, yeah. These people had books and paper, you know. It could have been perishable material.
You know, talking about the graffiti, you're already inside a building or on a floor of a building.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
We're talking about that initial thing. How many zapales does it take to
Yeah.
build a hotspot,
Well,
for
if
example?
they build a room at a time, they.
Well, but you know, if you're gonna cut your stone to 1 zapal in size, say this way.
They're big.
Yeah, well, zapal is like
Yeah. Well, I mean,
30 some inches. Well, that one that I showed you there from Washington looks like that, and they're like 2 foot wide.
you don't know whether they were going to be used like that.
Oh no, of course not.
Okay. Next.
I lost something. No, that's the one that don't work. Yes, yes, and in fact, we've gone all over that. All civilizations start with megalithic construction, where the stone is held in place by its weight. And as we move, all civilizations then discovered some type of mortar, and we'll discover about that. And then they go to smaller stone that can be glued together with the mortar. All civilizations have gone through that same stage of megalithic, smaller stone. Eventually you get to a stone that is much smaller stone with more mortar, and then you have concrete. And that's what concrete is. Okay. This is the inside of Sunantunich. And we think that those poles, okay, that are up there, and as you know, all know, they're ubiquitous in Maya construction. We really think that that was scaffolding. It was in no way structural, because we have actually run calculations, and they're not strong enough and spaced close enough at the top to be in any way, shape, or form have any significant structural capacity as a compression member. And towards the bottom one, where there would be in tension, the pole embedded in mortar would slip right out. It would have no capacity to speak of in tension. So there is really no structural significance to these vault poles. I can fish it up. But they do make very good idea for supporting scaffold, and then they just left them in place. In fact, Rick and I in Palenque went to one new construction right next to our motel. And that's exactly how they were being used.
I agree, you know, we've had long conversations about that, and, you know, I'm generally in agreement, but when you find these, you know, you never find them close enough to be able to span boards or something, or other poles.
Well, it depends how thick were the boards.
Well, they're probably not even boards, they're probably other poles, you know, they just lay them out, whatever, but the thing is that you would need them spaced closer than some of those vaults are.
Yeah, but not necessarily. They might have had bigger walls between them, and those could be taken out with other between them in the other direction.
There's a brand new paper that just came out, and I don't know whether I sent it to you or not, because I usually do.
Yeah.
Anyway, and something in Belize as well. And they come out with saying that they have, you know, that's been debate about those poles
Yeah,
for
I
a
know.
long time, but that indeed they're not structural.
They're not structural, exactly
Yes,
what they.
and they came to the same
We actually ran numerical calculations of the capacity of those poles. And of course, as you can see, this is an arch. So at the top, it will be, if anything, under compression. And these things don't hold that much in compression. And at the bottom, it will be in tension. And of course, a pole and mortar, just not capacity to speak out.
I have a different theory about
There's the theory that they were to hang curtains.
Well,
that. No, it's not a theory, that's a fact.
Well, they probably did. Since they were there already, they used them for that.
well, it all depends with the building, but obviously
Yeah.
you're not gonna hang a curtain from up there.
Of course not. From the top one, of course not.
But what you will hang from up there are things that you don't want rodents and
That
things
is
to get
correct,
at.
yes.
Sure.
That is correct.
Yeah, but my belief is that they were used for all of this because they were there. But that's not why they were there. Why they were there originally, of course, they wouldn't have put this just to hold things up out of the rats.
Do we know when Sunantunich was built?
Yeah, but I don't remember.
Oh, well, that's, yeah,
Well, knowing and remembering is two different things.
like tough and,
Yeah. Sunantunich, El Castillo is one of the vaults that we ran calculations both in our vault paper, in our vault research, and in our lintel research, both of which required dating, so we have good dates in our paper that we got from somewhere. Yes. El Castillo, because remember, Sunantunich was worked that well.
okay, thanks.
Okay, and this brings us to the beginning of our talk. That's from our paper, and this is scaffolding being used on the outside of a, that's something like by the size and what have you, that really looks like the church at Chichen. Yeah,
It's a little bit sided, but it's okay.
yeah, La Iglesia Chichen.
And it looks like they do use poles horizontally up there too, based on that sketch anyway.
Oh, yeah, you mean on the scaffolding on the side, yeah. Okay, let's talk about several things that are going on in there, though. One thing that we have not talked about but did mention is, of course, all of this, even up there here, was plastered. No, it is not stucco. There are...
In the newspaper, Facebook,
There are, anything you put that there is plaster. Anything you put on a wall to smoothen and level is plaster. And there are different kinds of plaster, even nowadays, based on the chemistry of the plaster, okay? That is gypsum plaster, prefabricated between two layers of paper, and we call it drywall. But that's basically gypsum, plaster of Paris, between two layers of papers, pre-manufactured in panels, but it's gypsum plaster. A lot of the Greeks, the Romans, until very late, that they discovered that they could create hydraulic cement by putting pozzolanic ash into there with their lime, and therefore discovered true stucco, which is what stucco is a lime plaster. I mean, it's a lime silicate plaster. Have used primarily lime plaster. Lime plaster is made by, it's called burning, nothing burns. It's actually calcinating, is the real technical term, of limestone. Marble, which is nothing more than metamorphized limestone. Okay, you put a bunch of limestone chips, and as you carved your stones out of your limestone quarry, all those chips you collect in baskets. And when you square off your stone, all those chips you collect in a basket. And those are the chips that then you put, maybe basket and all, and you burn the basket. And you put it in a kiln. And if it's raised to about 1,000 degrees, 900 degrees centigrade, you drive, remember, limestone is calcium carbonate, CaCO3. So you're driving CO2 out of the limestone, and you're left only CaO, calcium oxide. This calcium oxide that you're leaving is pretty much pebbles, bundles, and then you have to pretty much crush them down to get the powder lime. That's what real lime is. And then you grind those chips of lime just like you would in a mortar and pestle for corn. And that powder you left behind is real lime. Very, very caustic. It'll burn you if you get it on your skin. Remember, as a kid, whenever we went around construction sites, we were told to stay away from the lime piles. Anyway, that lime, if it gets wet, it turns into what in English is called slaked lime. This slaked lime, then you dry it, and it stores for quite a while, by the way, which the pure calcium oxide doesn't. This slaked lime, now if you put more water on it and make a paste, it turns into a paste just like hominy grits, you know, oatmeal, and thin oatmeal. And that paste will draw naturally over time. It doesn't harden very fast. Draws CO2 from the air into the mass of the of lime, and therefore turns back into calcium carbonate, limestone that you started with. So basically, you're shaping it whatever shape you want, or laying it wherever you want to, and hardens back into limestone. Okay? And usually you add things to it, like if you're using it for, anybody sees that? Yeah. If you're using it for plaster on a wall, you made a very thin mixture. And if you fill it with anything, you fill it with just a little bit of silt to make a fine mixture that you can apply on the walls. And the Spanish use this all the time, everywhere. You know what makes a very good lime? Bones. Bones will burn beautifully into a very good lime. So cemeteries used to, all cemeteries used to make lime. I remember in Cuba when I was a kid, driving with my father by the cemetery and smelling real foul smell. And I thought, what is?
Must have been the homeless, because how are you going to burn the bones of the family to make it out of stucco face? I'm sorry, a calcite.
The poor people or whatever, yeah.
You know.
Anyway, also shell makes, if you burn it, makes a very good lime. American colonists used to make a product called tabby, which was burned shell, and they let the shell pieces in, and the shell pieces that didn't burn, calcinate technically, were used as aggregate in the mortar or plaster that they use, and the product is called tabby.
See a lot of that in St. Augustine.
And all over the southeast there, Charleston, whatever. Yeah. Anyway, same material with a little bit more filler, okay? Sand, a little bit of crushed stone makes very good mortar for gluing your stones together. And now you don't have to be moving, if I could see this. Now you don't have to be moving huge megalithic blocks, 4 foot long, 2 foot wide, 1.5 foot high, okay? And very heavy. And God, how did these people build this without the wheel? I'm gonna vomit if I hear that one more. As a matter of fact, the Maya did know the wheel. We have wheel toys all over. In fact, the Institute of Maya Studies put out a whole monograph on Maya wheel toys a bunch of years back. That was what, maybe like 28 years ago or more? So they definitely knew the concept of the wheel. What they didn't have was wheeled vehicles. A wheeled vehicle is a lot different from just wheels. If you had to go home right now, and instead of a car, we just say there and dump your 4 wheels. You ain't gonna go very far in that, will you? You need axles, you need bearings, you need power for movement, okay? And the first thing you need is an axle. In the Middle East, where a wheel was probably used earlier than anywhere, you don't really get wheeled vehicles, even the simplest one, until you get bronze, and then you can make axles out of bronze. If you, Egyptian chariots, Assyrian chariots, all of those had bronze axles.
Well, that's it. They don't have bronze. So
They don't have bronze.
right.
So the wheel alone would not have been very useful, is what I'm saying.
Well, yeah.
Even if you had, look, the Egyptians, even if you have a chariot, what are you gonna do? You ain't gonna put one of those big blocks on a chariot, your axle will break. Even if it's a bronze axle, you'll bend, okay? So if you want to move anything on the surface, you use rollers. Rollers made out of whole logs, which of course we can't find because they rot. Easter Island, Rapa Nui, we know that they moved those huge stone heads on palm tree trunks, okay? Trunks make very good rollers. Also, something the Romans did, you can take your whole stone and put enough wood around it that you turn the whole cage around the stone pretty much into a round log that you can just roll the whole thing over. So those people are moving other smaller stone for the top and what have you. In later Maya construction, of course, they built primarily the inside out of real concrete, lime concrete again, which is just like lime mortar, but with just a little bit more rock. And of course, since it took a little bit more rock, that's filler, it used a little less lime. One of our last research, the Institute, had been an actual numerical evaluation of how much lime went into making lime mortar and lime plaster. And all the samples we have were just of Belize. But, and we made it radiometrically, precisely by measuring how much new CO2 was absorbed. You want more details? Read the paper. And the bottom line was, it was where, about 12 to 19% at the most. Something that surprised me a lot, being a structural engineer, I expected the mortar to be richer in actual lime than the surface plaster. Turned out to be the opposite. The surface plaster had a little less lime than the mortar on the average, at least for the samples we got. Questions? Oh, yeah, very little. Yeah, very little. Yeah, we'll go over all questions afterwards. I thought we were going to go over samples too, but...
Jack, he has to leave early because he has a test. He had a
okay, you go first.
Well, we were just talking about when you transport
What?
the big stones, when you transported the big stones,
Yeah.
how did they get them on top of the palm trees?
No. Palm trees are already on the ground.
No, the palm trees are on the ground, right, but how did they get the stone?
Just dump it on it. Now you have this down here, yeah, you just push it over with levers. Huh? Very carefully, I really don't know.
Yes.
Yes.
And that was one thing that I had over the scaffolding.
Well, obviously you didn't do it in the scaffolding, it's not
Exactly.
strong.
And-
When you were putting small stones, yeah.
Well, the Egyptians, of course, built that ramp.
The Egyptians built ramps. I don't know about around, but definitely straight over. At several places, one of them was, I believe it was one side of Karnak, Rick. There's still, most of the ramp is still there. They used to ramp it up. And what they used to do,
And where? Masada? Okay.
yeah, they used to actually, the scaffold inside was made out of dirt. So the way they did is they actually filled the place with dirt as they went. You know, they put the bottom stone, then more dirt around it, then the next stone, then more dirt around it. And when it was to the top, they would just work from the top of the stone, carving, and then they removed the dirt as they went down. We know the Egyptians did that.
This is something that is interesting, but the earlier buildings, I have noticed that you only have megalithic stones at the bottom.
Yes.
You never have the big stones
Yes.
on the top.
Yeah,
So-
no, yeah, once you start, yes, obviously,
No,
yes.
not obviously, because the Egyptians did it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, so, you
Yeah.
know, what did they do? And they did not do it because
Yeah.
they kept those megalithic stones. at
They
the bottom.
they think that, by the way, Stonehenge also was mounded in dirt, and they brought those huge lintels on the
Yeah.
top and then carved the dirt out.
Okay, so there you go. Could they do that? I don't think they did because they didn't put them in the top. You don't see those megalithic.
No, most of the megalithic stones on the bottom. And of course, once they moved to real concrete, you take everything, you take the small things on your back, yeah.
And this is not a pyramid.
This
Again,
is not a pyramid, right.
So that's usually a temple.
Yeah.
That's on top of a platform,
Yeah,
right?
yes.
And
Well, this one isn't, as you know well, but
which one is this?
assuming that this is La Iglesia.
Back there?
Looks like it.
That's it, I think I'm pretty sure that's,
I'm pretty sure too.
and I have it in my,
Or the Shishan Shop looks very much like it too.
No, that's
Yes.
much later, but there are.
Yeah.
There are two platforms in Chichen, that first.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then the back.
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
platform as well.
Yes.
Because if you remember, you go behind the church and you have to go.
Oh,
down.
yeah, sure.
So there is a platform under there.
Yes, yes.
Man-made platform. Okay, so that's what they used it. They didn't use the megalithic for the.
Oh, no, no.
For the,
No,
you know.
no.
When is it?
Although,
that's not 100% true. At Shop Mount K is where we saw a lot of those.
Yeah.
We used a lot of them for stairs too.
yeah, oh, sure, because it already gives you your whole piece. Already gives you your whole piece.
Actually built up, there was part of the wall that went up.
Yeah,
Right, the wall, yes, they're up to a certain extent. To a certain extent. Yeah.
okay, Rick was bringing up in the movie Apocalypto, you see, there's a shot that you see the builders all covered in white. If they had been covered in lime, calcium oxide like that, they would all be at the hospital. Actually, the lime would be looking red from the bleeding.
Well, they showed that one guy spitting up blood.
Well, he would be more than splitting it. He would be oozing it out of his pores all over. That stuff really burns in more ways than one because it's also exothermic. So it burns you heat-wise in addition to chemically.
Is it true that they say that one of the factors for the fall of the Mayan civilization was the fact that they were using deforestation to burn, and you brought up the term.
Can you pardon my French here? Can I say bullshit? No, not whatsoever. There was deforestation, but I can guarantee you that the deforestation was to plant maize.
The deforestation they used to make lime, a lot of it.
Yes.
I don't think so. They did not.
They had to burn green
Other
because of the heat.
Other people have run calculations on how much wood you had to produce. A lot more wood went to produce heat for eating, for cooking, and a lot more cutting down to create milpas for planting corn.
But the point is that you're using it a lot, and the lime making process was one of the, I don't know about
Well,
that.
it doesn't matter. I mean, listen, they
Drop in the bucket.
it's documented that they created problems because of erosion when they deforested for farming, for
Yeah. But the concept, the idea that they deforested their environment to burn wood to make lime for all of the buildings is extremely simplistic and ridiculous.
And keep in mind one other thing too. When the Maya, when they stressed an area or they exhausted a lot of the resources, they moved to some other place. Like for instance, Tikal. Tikal in the early classic or the pre-classic was a pre-classic. They originally thought was not very sophisticated or evolved and everything like that. And basically what happened is they're finding now that they were extremely sophisticated. And Tikal was abandoned in pre-classic time. I'm sorry, not Tikal.
Washington?
No, where Richard.
No, it's pretty much what you, yeah.
El
Mirador.
Mirador was abandoned. And they actually, and then Tikal comes into advice because they just moved down the road.
Yes, we just,
At one point in this research we did, I actually calculated the total amount of lime for plastering one of the buildings at Caracol. I think it was at Caracol. And it was a large number, but it wasn't a prohibitive number.
but another item on that, because that's always a very interesting thing that we debate on, is that those buildings didn't have one cover of plaster, just like we would do today.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them had in their 30s and 40s levels of
Yeah, you had to replaster. In fact, we think that one of the reasons that the Temple of the Seven Dolls at Civil Chaltun was abandoned and not covered is because how much maintenance they were having to do to it because it was cracking all to hell.
Yeah, but they had bad.
Because of a bad foundation problem.
There's more to it than just the
Yeah, I know.
foundation that collapsed.
Anything else to show? One chisel?
yes, one chisel.
One chisel. Anyway, it's pretty good. I'll keep it if nobody wants it.
Well, they
No, of course.
said it's for us to keep it, but I don't know what we have to give them in exchange. We might give them
Yeah.
a book in exchange.
Yeah.
Well, they were cities. Yes.
Yes.
I want your food. We're out of food. We want your city centers.
Yeah, just like Arabs. Yeah, if you want to see that chisel a little closer. I'm keeping that one.
One of the interesting things for us is that this keeps changing, all the theories, because, and the movement of, what we're learning today is when we thought that they were very small and not that important, what we're learning today is that that period of the pre-classic, which is basically 1,000 to about 200 AD, 1,000 they were very sophisticated. It's just that it's been buried under
Layers and
modern
layers and
cities.
layers, yeah.
But what they have is absolutely unbelievable.
In fact, Ed Kerjak, there was a specialist in site settlement patterns, thinks, his opinion was that the reason that most of Uxmal has been preserved so well was because the area was such a poor area that when it was abandoned, was totally abandoned. Nobody built on top of it again.
Well, that one has 5 levels.
Yeah.
So at least 5 different
Yeah.
levels of construction.
On the other hand, you go to Merida and there's nothing of Tijol, because of course,
Well, the Spanish came.
yeah, well, and they themselves all over and over again.
But the later cities like Uxmal or Mayapan are in pretty good shape
Yeah,
today.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Mayapan is, and yeah,
They're late.
yeah.
We're talking about the
Yeah,
real
well,
early-
they're
we're
very
talking about
late,
the early
yes,
classic, a lot
yes,
is being
yes.
discovered, so.
Yes.
Anyway, Jack, I hate to tell you, but more questions would be best that enter another subject because it's kind of late.
Well, I'm through,
Oh, okay.
So we're
perfect.
just into questions.
perfect.
I told you it wasn't very
I'm
long.
gonna say one thing, I talked about, when we were at Caban, I talked about that freeze on the cot spot that I said I didn't see.
Yeah.
That zigzag one. Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and there it is.
there's one right there.
Yeah. Which tells you a lot that it's very late in that Pook area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or should we say
Let me ask you
Pookish, because
So let me ask you about something.
Dr. Edwards insisted that it's not true Pook.
Well, I don't.
Dig him up.
Edwards died 50 years
Digging him up and argue with him.
Yeah. No, my point is that you're talking about stucco and whatever. Oops.
That's okay.
The
We did
plaster,
talk about stucco.
The lime plaster. But,
Yeah.
And you're talking about covering. But I'm talking about the huge figures.
Yes.
That are outside.
Yes.
Or like a whole serpent.
Yes, yes.
Or a whole figure.
Yes,
Or all that.
yes.
That it's made out of plastic.
Well, remember, very often, not necessarily, very often they put a lane stone to make a core of stone and then plaster over it. Like
In the masks, yes. But in those as well, no. Because they were.
at the quadrangle of the nuns,
Yeah.
you have a stone core that then got plastered for all of those snakes.
So they have a stone.
Core, yeah.
In some places, blank gate was carved right out of the plaster, like on the
Yes.
panels, those panels, that's
That's
pure
what
plaster.
I'm saying is they used much more
But
than.
these frets, when you have the step frets and stuff like that, it's like Jack says, that whole mosaic thing, they put that all together with stone and then plastered over it.
Amazing, yeah, okay. That's why it's so repetitive.
Well, it was easier, like those what, 199 chalk mask at the Cots Pop. You know that was being mass produced.
No, yeah, but
Yeah.
you don't have them covered with today. They're
No.
not covered with the lime,
Not now.
not now.
I can't tell you if they were originally or
Well,
not.
they had to.
Yeah.
I mean, no, you have to have evidence that they were or not.
Of course, and I don't
There's
know.
too many of them.
I
Yeah.
would say that they, that they probably were, and they were probably painted.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, remember, we're finding out that almost all those Greek temples that we are used to thinking of them in gorgeous marble, they painted over all of that marble. I don't know why we would do that, but and remember, almost everybody was smart enough to use local stone. The Greeks built so much in marble because Mount Hametos is right there, Mount Pentel is right there. You pretty much just had to roll the rock off the hill. Limestone in most of the world, like you saw, the Romans used mostly tufa that was local right there and then covered it in pretty travertine or brick. Although then they took very often the brick and put thin layers of marble on top of it. Augustus, just before he died, had a famous phrase that he said, I found Rome in brick and left it in marble. I always wondered, what did he mean by that, you know, because he didn't tear things down and rebuild them until first time I went to Pompeii, and there I could see brick columns with this thin little marble stuff around it that had flaked off.
Why does that surprise you? Because you thought it was solid marble?
Yep. Like the Pantheon, like Parthenon is. Parthenon are solid marble.
Well, they're drums, they are solid.
Yeah,
Drums.
yeah, that's what I mean, but every drum is solid.
Very good. You done?
Pretty much. I was done when I showed that. We were into questions, and we were going to go
I
into
know,
show and
I
tell
know. What can I tell you?
until we had very little show and no tell.
That was very good, Jack.
Did you give me the silk back, or you kept it?
No, I wasn't gonna take it, of course not.
Well, I am. Hey, let me give you a card if you want to call me for anything.
Where did you get this image from?
Which?
The one on the screen.
Jim? I got it from Jim. Where Jim ripped it off, I don't have the slightest idea. No sweat. And drop the damn mister. Jack is good enough. Like they say, Mr. Rodriguez was my father.